Hey folks, so I want to give you an introduction to a concept called codons, which are the language or the words of DNA. DNA codes, as you know, for how we build ourselves. But how we get there involves these things called codons. And so I want to explain how codons work and what they do in setting up or building our bodies. So let's start by talking about the alphabet we all know well, the English alphabet. Of course, the English language has 26 letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so on, right? This is our alphabet. We arrange these letters into words of varying lengths, like dog or potato or it or whatever. And these are all words that we understand because we know the language English. We just don't know the language of DNA. We'll get to that in a bit. These words also generally have different meanings. Dog and sprint and potato are three different things, and they conjure up different ideas in our heads. That said, some of these words essentially mean the same thing. They're what we call synonyms. And synonyms are something we'll also find in DNA when we get to talking about that. Okay, so how is the English language different from the DNA language? So the language of DNA is similar, but has some important differences. First of all, in DNA, we also have an alphabet and words. The alphabet, though, unlike English, only has 4 letters, A, G, C, and T. Again, in English, of course, we understand there are 26 letters. In DNA, just A, G, C, and T. And of course, those each represent nucleotide bases, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, respectively. So only 4 letters to DNA. That makes it a much simpler alphabet. That said, we also, of course, understand that there's this complementary base pairing. A always pairs with T, and C always pairs with G. This becomes important in reading DNA for making proteins, and also for DNA replication. But those are topics for another day. So with that, how do we read or how do we understand the words of DNA? Well, let's try this Venn diagram to start. So DNA and English have words that have things in common. Like we mentioned, in English, there's a 26-letter alphabet. In DNA, it's only 4 letters. In English, the words have varying lengths. It can be a 1-letter word all the way up to 10, 15 letters for some of the longest words in the world. In DNA, all letters are 3 words long. There are no words longer, and there are no words shorter. Different letter combinations have different meanings in both DNA and in English words. And yes, both DNA and English have synonyms. In other words, some words that have the same meaning in both contexts. We call these 3-letter words in DNA codons, and each codon codes for or means a specific amino acid. And I want to explain what amino acids are for just a minute, and then I'll come back to talk about codons one more time. So amino acids are the building blocks for our bodies. They're super important to put us together. It's just a question of how we organize them. To make skin, or part of our liver, or part of a leaf, or whatever, are all different arrangements of amino acids. These amino acids chain together to make up things called proteins, and they build most of the functional parts of living things. So proteins are really important, and they're built out of amino acids. There are generally 20 different amino acids that chain together in different order to make all of the different proteins. So we have to know what these amino acids are and how we chain them together to build up our different proteins. So here they are. Here are the 20 different amino acids. You'll notice they all have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in them, as well as nitrogen. There are a few that also include sulfur, but most of them carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. Here are a couple more detailed models of 2 of them, serine and asparagine. And again, these amino acids are chained together to make up our proteins. And the way they're set up, you can take these different amino acids, they chain together in what's called a peptide, and then that peptide folds up to make a protein. So all of the proteins in our body are amino acids chained together and folded up in different ways. So codons code for these amino acids. Every 3 letters of DNA codes for a specific amino acid. These codons are the words that mean each amino acid. So just like the word DOG, or dog, represents the cute little animal, the letters AGT in DNA code for the amino acid serine, CCT, proline, and so on. Every single amino acid is coded for by a 3-letter sequence of DNA. And these words literally mean these amino acids. You can figure out which amino acid is which using a cool table like this. These tables allow you to figure out which different amino acids by each individual codon. So for example, CTA here, if you start in the center with the letter C, move out to T, and then A, you figure out that CTA codes for leucine. So that is the codon that means leucine. And you can work anywhere down this table, and you can see how different word combinations code for different things. You'll also notice that CTA, CTC, CTT, and CTG all code for leucine. They code for the same thing. And this is common. With 4 letters, there's 64 different possible codons, but only 20 amino acids. Again, just like English, DNA has synonyms, some words that mean the same thing. So AGA and AGG both code for arginine, and so on. So if you have a strand of DNA like this, it's best to think of them not as individual letters, but as combinations of 3 letters, or codons, each codon coding for a specific amino acid. So CTT codes for proline, AAG for lysine, and so on. Every 3 letters of DNA codes for an amino acid. And you'll notice here that CCT, CCG, CCG all code for proline. In other words, they're synonyms. So these amino acids would line up, if this is the code of DNA, they'd line up like this and eventually chain together to make a peptide. This peptide then folds to make a protein, and these proteins are what build our bodies. How we get from the information in our DNA to the actual proteins is a little bit of a complicated process called protein synthesis or transcription or translation. And we'll talk about that in another lecture, but I wanted to make sure you understood what a codon was and how we get from codons to amino acids.